Welcome back to Dead Men Talking, where we revive the brightest minds in history to discuss their greatest ideas. I'm Brandon Vogt, the host and the founder of Claritas U, which thousands of Catholics use to get clear and confident about their faith. You can click below to learn more about Claritas U. Today, we continue our series on opponents of Christianity, and I have the joy of welcoming Immanuel Kant to join us. He's one of the most consequential modern philosophers. Immanuel, thanks for joining us, especially across the vast divide of space and time. If I have this correctly, you just celebrated your 300th birthday. You were born in 1724, so congratulations on that. But listen, what a great privilege it is for me and for all of us here. I've studied your work for many years, and I must say I found most of it fascinating, if a little challenging and verbose, especially your critique of pure reason. It's very long, and perhaps a few more paragraph breaks would have been helpful there, but I digress. Listen, we're glad you're here. Welcome, Immanuel.
Mr. Brandon Vogt, first, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you. Thank you for the birthday wishes. And yes, I have heard that readers have found critique of pure reason challenging. Yet I wrote with as much clarity as I could summon.
I do appreciate that. But today I want to talk about some of the key ideas, not just in that book, but in your work in general, especially about the topic of God and morality. I've always admired your careful thinking about morality. Now, of course, morality just refers to right and wrong, how we ought to act. So I thought we could just start our discussion by focusing on that question. In your view, how do we determine morality? How do we know what's right or wrong?
Yes, as you note, I've spent a lot of time thinking about right and wrong, especially how we can figure out what we ought to do through reason alone. My own view is that we can determine right and wrong simply by using our ability to think, what philosophers call reason. We don't necessarily need religion or a sacred book to know these things. For example, one does not need to be a Christian to know lying is wrong. In fact, I propose a test I like to call the universal law principle. If you're wondering whether an action is right, imagine that everyone acted that way all the time. Would that destroy trust or cause chaos? If so, then it cannot be right. If everyone lied, no one could trust each other. If everyone cheated, promises would be meaningless.
I think I see. So basically, your question is, what if my behavior became a universal law, a universal rule? If so, would the world flourish? And if the answer is no, then it's wrong, it's bad behavior. And if the answer is yes, then it's good behavior. That's what you would call your categorical imperative, right? That behavior is good if it's the type of behavior we wish everyone would perform, and it's bad if we don't want everyone to perform it.
That is correct. I want a moral system that works for everyone, regardless of religion, culture, or personal feelings. After all, feelings can change. They are about as steady as a candle in the wind.
Whew, candle in the wind, little Elton John reference there. Nice, I like that. Anyways, yes, that's smart, and Catholics would agree. We'd agree that reason, clear thinking, can tell us a lot about right or wrong. But here's what we would add to that, Immanuel, that morality is not just a logical grid. It's not like, if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. Morality is about living in a relationship with God, who created us with a purpose and helps us to become the people he created us to be. So for us, moral rules come from a loving Father who is guiding us into a life of excellence, not from a cosmic moral policeman. So God guides us through reason, yes, but also through what he has revealed in Scripture, in the person of Jesus, in the teachings of his church. All of that comes together to help us to live the good life, to grow into saints.
Brandon, You see, that's where I get cautious. If morality comes from God, then people might think they have to follow the rules because God says so, not because they actually understand that the rules are good. To me, doing the right thing because it's right is the purest form of morality.
Yeah, we'd agree on that blind obedience is not the goal. You don't want people just doing what they're told without thinking. But see, God is not a dictator that hands down random arbitrary commands. He's more like a loving father. In fact, here's a good image for you, Immanuel. Tell me what you think. Imagine a coach who is trying to help you to become a better athlete, and he assigns you all sorts of drills and routines and exercises. You know they're not random because each one, you know, is designed to help you become stronger or faster or more skilled, even if you don't quite understand how each drill or routine correlates to those goals. Well, it's the same with God's moral commands. They're not arbitrary. They're meant to help us become the best versions of ourselves. And when we follow those commands, we flourish as we are designed to do. But here's the extra twist. Catholics believe that God doesn't just give us these routines and drills and skills to develop. He helps us in this because he gives us grace. He gives us his own strength, his own power to live out the good that we know we should do. Of course, grace doesn't override our freedom. It perfects it. It elevates it. It's like giving a piano player not just sheet music, but a properly tuned instrument so that they can play the notes well. They can play the song as well as possible.
Very interesting, Brandon. So, are you saying grace enhances your moral performance?
Exactly. In our view, morality is not just about checking boxes. It's not about just doing the right moral things. It's about becoming a good person, becoming the kind of person who wants the good and who is able to freely do it. That's why Catholic tradition talks not only about duty, but about virtue, the habit of loving the good for its own sake.
Ah, yes. That's slightly different from my system. I'd say a person is moral if they act out of a sense of duty, because they recognize something as right, and then they choose to do it, even when it's hard. But I'll admit, my emphasis on duty can sound a bit stern. It's as if the universe were run by a schoolmaster with a particularly sharp ruler. But I do think that the will to do the right thing, even when it's hard, is what gives morality its worth.
True. But from the Catholic perspective, duty is not supreme. Duty is not the ultimate goal. Love is an even higher motive than duty. A husband who is faithful to his wife merely out of duty is commendable, not a bad thing. But a husband who is faithful out of love, that's the ideal. Duty gets us to the starting line, but love runs the marathon.
Well put, Brandon. Though I must point out that love, without reason to guide it, can lead to disasters. History is littered with well-intentioned crusades that ended badly. People with good motivations, even motivated by love, who did horribly immoral things.
Yes, that's true. I agree that love without truth can be dangerous, but the reverse is true as well. Truth without love can be equally cold. That's why we believe that both belong together. In fact, one of your fellow Germans, Joseph Ratzinger, who eventually became Pope of the Catholic Church, he titled his final encyclical Caritas in Veritate, Charity in Love. He was making the same point here that we need love and truth, or even better, love in truth. The two are linked and co-enhancing.
You know, Brandon, in my philosophy, I have always tried to keep faith and reason separate. That's not because I dislike religion. In fact, I believe in a living God. It's because I want moral truths to be available to everyone, regardless of what religion they follow, or if they follow none at all. If moral truths are tied too closely to religion, then non-religious people feel they can't access them. So I try to show that reason alone can give us a solid moral system.
Well, Immanuel, that's not too far from the Catholic view. We actually agree here, I think. Catholic theology says that there are moral truths that are written into the human heart that anyone can discover by reason alone. For example, do not murder is not a Christian command. It's a truth that anyone can figure out by reflecting on human society and human dignity. But here's where I think you and I differ. We don't think as Catholics that faith and reason are two separate kingdoms. We think instead that they're like two eyes. Reason will show you a lot if you just focus with that one eye, but faith, if you use the other eye as well, adds depth perception. It allows you to see reality in all of its fullness. One of our great popes in the Catholic Church said that faith and reason are like two wings of the same bird, and you need both of them to fly. Reason is one wing. It helps us figure out a lot of important moral facts and duties, but by itself, reason can only take us so far. We can only kind of scamper along the ground, flapping one wing. The other wing is faith. Faith lets us see the bigger picture, where we came from, where we're going, why our moral choices matter forever. And so faith with reason is how we fly. That's how we soar in the moral life.
That's an interesting image, but I don't see faith as an equal wing to reason. I worry that faith can sometimes cloud judgment, not clarify it. I've seen cases where people believe that something is right only because their religion says so, even if it doesn't sound logical.
True, faith can cloud judgment, but I would add, so can too much reason. In fact, I've met philosophy students who could argue for hours about whether they exist, but can't even remember where they parked their car. So we need both, and we need both in moderation, not in excess. You make a good point here, and Catholics would agree. Faith can be misunderstood. That's why the Catholic Church teaches that faith can never contradict reason, and that if it seems like faith and reason are in conflict, then we've misunderstood either the faith or the reasoning. But when they work together, it's powerful. Reason keeps faith grounded. It keeps us from sliding into superstition. And faith pushes reason further. It makes us ask questions that reason alone never thinks to ask. Questions such as, what happens after death? Or why is there something rather than nothing? Or what's the ground of all being? Without both, you're a bit lopsided. It's like, again, flapping with one wing or trying to row a boat with just one oar. If you do that, you'll just go in circles.
So, Brandon, you're saying faith and reason should work together, each keeping the other in balance. I can see the appeal of that. However, my approach would be to build a moral system on reason alone, then let faith be a personal addition if someone chooses. Yours integrates the two more fully.
That's right. For us Catholics, they're not two separate compartments. They're partners in the same search for truth. That's how I'd put it.
Now, if it pleases you, Brandon, I'd like to talk more about the connection between morality and God. In my own thinking, I've concluded that morality makes more sense if we assume God exists and that there's life after death. I say assume, because I don't think we can prove God's existence the way we prove a math equation. But if there's no God, there's no guarantee of ultimate justice. Bad people could prosper forever, and good people could suffer forever, and that would be terribly unfair. So, I call God and the afterlife postulates of reason, in other words, necessary assumptions. Without them, morality feels incomplete, so we assume God exists and that there's an afterlife. But I stop short of saying we can have certain knowledge of God.
Well, see, Immanuel, I'd go further than that. We agree that God is necessary for morality to be complete, that if there's no God, then there's no objective morality because there's no objective standard or ground for goodness. But we Catholics believe that God is not just a helpful idea, he's real. He exists, he's a living reality, and we can know that with certainty. We think there are good philosophical arguments for God's existence, such as the idea that the universe had a cause, that cause must be outside the universe, and it must be thus timeless and powerful and intelligent and immaterial, and this points to God. We also believe that God has revealed himself in history and that there's good evidence for this. Now, I know, having read your books, that you balk at the philosophical arguments for God, especially the ontological argument, but also some of the cosmological arguments. So what I would point you to is what I think is maybe the strongest, most compelling evidence for God, namely the person of Jesus Christ, his life, his teachings, and especially his resurrection from the dead. The resurrection is not just a nice story. It's not just a beautiful, heartwarming account of goodness winning over evil in the end. We think this is a historical event that you can investigate, just like any other event in ancient history. And that if it happened, if Jesus rose from the dead, it proves that God is real, that he became one of us, and that he's spoken to us directly, and that this has monumental ramifications for the moral life, what we've been discussing.
I hesitate with that, because in my framework, reason alone cannot see God clearly. I think we can believe in God for moral reasons, but that's different from having a direct knowledge of him, or certainty that he is real.
I get that. In Catholic thought, we say that reason can point to God. And again, I think reason can lead to certainty of God's existence. In fact, that's a formal teaching of the Catholic Church. All Catholics are supposed to hold that. But to your point, reason cannot give the full picture of God. Reason can tell us that God exists, but it can't tell us everything about God. And it's also not the same as an encounter with God. Maybe consider this analogy. It's like seeing footprints in the snow. Footprints can tell us that someone has been there. You can know with pretty good certainty that some person walked through the snow, and your reason might even be able to infer from the footprints something about that person, such as their shoe size, their height, their weight, etc. But their footprints cannot tell you about the person's likes or interests, what they enjoy, who they love, what their character is like. We need something more than reason for that. Well, the same holds for God. Reason can tell us that God exists and can affirm some of his qualities, but faith completes the picture. Through faith, we learn about God through his own self-disclosure, what he's revealed to us about himself. He's done this through the sacred scriptures, the Bible. He's done this through the church, but he's done this most prominently through the person of Jesus, who is God in human flesh. And again, that changes everything. Jesus shows us what morality is because he is the good incarnate. So Jesus says, for example, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Follow me. Therefore, morality is not just about following rules. It's about following a person who is truth and goodness.
Well, Brandon, that's a very big claim. If it's true, it would radically change our understanding of morality.
You're exactly right. I completely agree with that conclusion. And again, that's why for Catholics, we believe that morality, faith, the existence of God, they're all tied together. You can get some of the right pieces through reason alone, but again, that's like one wing or one oar, or one side of the equation, one eye opened. If you want to see the whole picture, you need both eyes, you need both wings, you need both oars rowing in the same direction. You need the light of faith to go along with reason.
Now, Brandon, perhaps we can conclude by talking about freedom. Here's a point you might appreciate. My entire moral philosophy assumes that we are free, that we could have acted otherwise. If we're not free, then holding someone responsible is like blaming a clock for chiming at noon.
Yes, I fully agree with that. As my good friend Bishop Barron often says, freedom, true freedom, is not freedom to do what we want. It's freedom to do what we ought. So it's not a freedom from constraints. It's a freedom for excellence. So freedom is not just the ability to choose anything without any interference. It's the ability specifically to choose the good. That's true freedom. One of my favorite examples to illustrate this is a piano player. A piano player, in one sense, is free to play the wrong notes. They can just mash the keys and play whatever sounds they want. But that's not to be truly free as a piano player. To be free as a piano player means you've so mastered the instrument, you've so internalized the chords and the fingerings and the positions that you can play whatever song you want beautifully. That's true freedom. Freedom means freedom for excellence. You have been conditioned to behave in a good way so as to have excellence as your performance.
Well, Brandon, this has been marvelously illuminating. It seems to me we agree that reason can discover moral truths, but you also believe faith completes the picture. You believe that faith and reason are not competitors but partners, and you think God's existence isn't just a useful assumption, but rather something we can know with certainty and respond to.
Well, yes, I really enjoyed it too, Immanuel. There's a lot about which we agree. You have a strong appreciation for reason, and you build your foundation of reality on reason. But I think you just need to go a little bit further, to step beyond reason. If reason is the foundation, then faith is the house on which you build on top of that rational foundation. And together, reason and faith combine to produce the fully good life. So thank you, Immanuel, for joining us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening and joining in for this conversation. Stay tuned for more interviews in our Dead Men Talking series, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Dead Men Talking, sponsored by Claritas U. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you a little more about Claritas U. Claritas U is an online platform that I created several years ago, designed to help you discuss your Catholic faith with clarity and confidence, especially when it comes to hot-button issues. If you've ever struggled to explain your faith to a family member, a friend, or coworker, Claritas U is for you. Nearly 10,000 Catholics have joined, and they're all becoming experts on the tough topics that everyone is talking about, including IVF, abortion, atheism, evil and suffering, transgenderism, the Eucharist, a whole lot more. There are separate video courses on each of these topics, including courses on how to draw people back to the church after they've drifted away. In fact, we have over 40 video courses inside there for you. On each topic, you'll learn all the wisdom of the church, how to answer the top objections to the Catholic view, and more importantly, exactly how to communicate that wisdom with clarity and confidence, how to be a more compelling Catholic. Each video course also features expert interviews with leading Catholic voices such as Father Mike Schmitz, Dr. Peter Kraft, Dr. Brant Petrie, and more, giving you their best tips and advice on how to share your faith in today's culture. So tons of exciting things await you inside of Claritas U. Just click the link below to join. I look forward to seeing you inside, and even more back here for the next episode of Dead Men Talking. God bless you.